I was here before him. Let your wannabe Mafia boss wait his turn. The salesgirl stopped breathing. The man in the black suit, the one built like a small building, the one who just watched an entire luxury mall empty out in under 4 minutes, looked at Zara like she'd grown a second head. She held his gaze and set the shoes down on the counter with a soft, deliberate click. Ring me up, she told the salesgirl. The girl didn't move. Her eyes were fixed somewhere past Zara's left shoulder, and whatever she saw there had turned her into a statue. Minute G. Zara didn't turn around. What's behind me? Her best friend's voice came out very small. Zara, baby, we should go. I have been saving for these shoes for 6 weeks. Zara. If you want to see how this story unfolds, grab a popcorn and relax because it's about to get interesting, and don't forget to hit the subscription button. Drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from and like. I love seeing how far this story travel. 6 weeks. Minute G. I skipped lunch. I cancelled Netflix. I told myself every single Friday that they would still be here, and they were still here, and I am not leaving this counter without. Miss. The large man stepped closer. Not aggressive, just present, in the way that walls are present. The floor is closed. Zara turned around. And she understood, immediately, why the mall had entered. He was standing 20 feet away. Dark suit. No tie. The kind of face that sculptors attempt and don't quite achieve. Too sharp, too still, every feature arranged with a precision that felt less like genetics and more like a decision. His hands were in his pockets. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't saying anything. He was just there, and the space around him had a completely different quality than the rest of the air in the room. His eyes found hers across the distance. She didn't look away. Something moved across his face, a flicker, so small and so fast she thought she imagined it. Then he tilted his head, just slightly, the way you tilt your head when a sound catches you off guard. Tell him, Zara said, loudly enough to carry, that some of us don't have drivers and bodyguards and men who clear rooms for us. Tell him some of us took 3 buses to get here and we have been waiting for these shoes for a month and a half. She picked the shoes back up. He can have them all in 10 minutes. I just need to pay. The large man turned slowly and looked at his boss. His boss was still looking at her. Then he started walking. Zara. Minute G grabbed her wrist. Zara. I see him. He crossed the floor unhurried, like a man who had never once in his life needed to rush for anything, and he stopped close enough that Zara had to look up to hold his gaze. Up close he was worse. The stillness wasn't just an expression, it went all the way down, like something fundamental in him had simply switched off. His eyes were dark and completely, perfectly empty. The kind of empty that should have made her step back. She didn't step back. You didn't run, he said. Low voice. Even, flat, stripped of anything decorative. Was I supposed to? She said. Something happened in his eyes. Not warmth, nothing so generous as that. More like a circuit testing itself, sending a signal down a wire that hadn't been used in years. He took 1 step closer. She felt it, not fear, not exactly, a hyper-awareness, like every nerve ending had suddenly remembered it had a job to do. The hair on her arms. The air between them. The fact that he was looking at her the way people look at things they can't explain and aren't sure they believe. Step back, she said. He didn't. Move, he said instead, and she realized with a delayed shock that he was talking to himself, testing something, measuring something, his eyes still on her like she was an equation he was working out in real time. Bring her to the car, he said. And then everything happened at once. Minute G screamed. Hands closed around Zara's arms, firm, practiced, the grip of men who did this without thinking about it. She dropped the shoes. She heard them hit the marble and something in her chest dropped with them. Get off me, she twisted, got one arm free, and the large man caught it again. You cannot kidnap someone in a galleria. There are cameras, there are laws, there are. Zara. Minute G was fighting her way forward, bag swinging, absolutely unhinged. A man in black stepped smoothly into her path and she bounced off him like he was a wall. Don't touch her. She won't be harmed. His voice cut through the chaos. Calm. Final. Neither will you, if you stop. Neither will I, Zara laughed, high and furious. You're kidnapping me. He walked toward her. His men parted. He stopped directly in front of her and reached out, his hand closing around her arm just above the elbow, and then he stopped. Everything stopped. Not the room, him, her, the space between them. He'd gone completely still, eyes dropping to where his hand met her skin, and his face, that cold, closed, impenetrable face, cracked. Not dramatically. Just a fracture. A single, unguarded second where something passed through his expression that had no business being on the face of a man who just cleared a shopping mall for his own convenience. Something that looked like relief. What are you? Zara started. Don't move, he said. His voice had changed. Still low, still controlled, but underneath it now, scraped raw, barely leashed. His grip on her arm didn't tighten. He wasn't holding her in place. He was holding her like someone holds something they thought they'd lost. Let go of. She's coming with me, he said. His penthouse sat above Seoul like a throne. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The whole city spread below like he owned it, which, Zara was beginning to understand, was not entirely metaphorical. The kind of furniture that didn't have prices because if you had to ask, the answer was simply no. She stood in the middle of it and shook. Not from cold. From fury. From the particular adrenaline of being something that had been happened to, without consent, without warning, without so much as an excuse me. Take me back, she said. He was at the window with his back to her, jacket shed now, shoulder straight, soul glittering behind him like he'd ordered the view specifically. Sit down. I don't want to sit down. Sit. Something in the word landed before she could stop it, and her legs made a decision her brain hadn't authorized. She sat on the edge of his couch and hated herself for it. He turned around. In the penthouse light he looked different. Not softer, never softer, but somehow more legible, like the distance between them in the mall had kept something hidden that the close quarters were now exposing. There was a tension in the set of his jaw, the line of his shoulders, that didn't read like power. It read like a man holding himself together with great, exhausting effort. I haven't felt anything, he said, since I was 20 years old. Zara went quiet. Not temperature. Not pain. Not the weight of my own hand when I put it on a surface. He said it without drama, without self-pity, the way you report facts about a car that no longer runs. Nerve damage. A surgery that went as well as it could and still took everything. He paused. I can't feel rain. I can't feel cold. I can't feel when I've been cut until I see the blood. He looked at her. I haven't felt another person's touch in 12 years. The room was very quiet. Until you spoke, he said. In the mall. When your voice crossed the room, I felt it. Here. He touched his chest, just briefly. And when I moved closer, it intensified. And when I touched your arm, something moved in his eyes, raw and disoriented and almost frightened. I felt your warmth. Your pulse. The texture of your sleeve. He stopped. You're the first thing I've felt in 12 years. Zara stared at him. The fury was still there. It hadn't gone anywhere. But something else had appeared underneath it, pressing up through the cracks, something that felt uncomfortably like being the only one who'd ever heard a sound no one else could hear. So, she said slowly, you kidnapped me. Because I'm your sensory toy. That's not. That is exactly what you said. I'll compensate you. He moved to the cabinet, unhurried. Name a number. Stay 1 month. Let me understand what this is. I have a job. He picked up his phone. Dialed. Said 4 sentences in Korean. Put it back in his pocket. Your employer will be granting you paid leave effective tomorrow, he said. The HR call has been made. Zara stood up. You cannot reach into someone's life and rearrange it. I already did. That's not something you get to do. Her voice cracked and she hated it. You don't get to just take people. Take their choices and their jobs and their Thursday evenings. I had plans, I had shoes, I had a whole normal life happening and you just... I know. He said it quietly. It stopped her. Not because it was an apology. It wasn't. But there was something in the way he said it, flat and factual and carrying the specific weight of a man who understood exactly what he'd done and had decided to do it anyway. That was more honest than anything she'd expected from him. I know what I've taken, he said. I know what I am. And I know that none of that changes the fact that I'm not willing to let you go. Zara grabbed the nearest throw pillow and launched it at his head. He caught it. One-handed. Without flinching. And he felt it, she saw it, the impact registering across his face in real time, the slight shift of weight, the sensation traveling up his arm, and his expression, that locked, airless, 12 years empty expression, broke open into a smile. Real. Unguarded. Startled. Like his own face had surprised him. Like he'd forgotten this was something faces could do. She took a step back. Because a cold man, she could fight. A cold man was predictable. All edges and walls and no entry points. But a man who smiled like that, like smiling was something he'd just remembered the taste of, like she'd given it back to him. That man wanted something. And he was looking at her like he'd already decided he was going to have it. The first week Zara tried to leave 3 times. The first time she made it to the elevator. The second time she made it to the lobby. The third time she made it to the street and stood in Seoul's night air for exactly 45 seconds before 2 men in black suits appeared on either side of her like they'd materialized from the pavement. Nobody touched her. Nobody threatened her. They just appeared, and one of them said, very politely, "Miss Williams. Mr. Kim is concerned," and walked her back inside. That was somehow worse than if they'd grab her. Inside the penthouse she refused to speak to him. Refused to be in the same room. When he walked into a space she walked out of it, and she told herself this was resistance, this was strategy. Except she could feel his eyes following her every time, and the silence between them had a texture to it, a specific weight, that told her silence was affecting him as much as her voice did. He didn't like not hearing her. Good. On day 5, Tae-sung, the large man from the mall, who turned out to be his second-in-command and who had the energy of someone who had accepted his life choices, knocked on her guest room door. "Your friend has been calling the police every day," he said, through the door. Zara opened it. Good. Tae-sung had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "The boss would like you to know she's being monitored for her safety." Monitored. Zara stared at him. "You're watching her. Ensuring she remains." "Get him. Get him right now." Jae-won appeared in the hallway 60 seconds later. He'd been close. Of course he'd been close. "You're having my friend followed." "Protected," he said. "Followed." Minute G Park. 26. Lives alone in Mapo-gu. Takes the 571 bus. His voice was neutral, factual, which made it exponentially worse. "She's been to 3 police stations. None of them will pursue it. She goes home every night and cries." He paused. "I thought you'd want to know she's not in danger." The hallway felt very small. "She's not in danger," Zara repeated. "Just under surveillance." "Would you prefer she was unprotected?" "Would you prefer She stopped herself. Breathed. "I want to see her." Something shifted in his expression. Not softness. More like recalibration. A man adjusting his parameters around a variable he hadn't fully accounted for. "Arrange it," he said to Tae-sung. Minute G walked in looking like she hadn't slept since Thursday. She took one look at Zara and burst into tears, and Zara burst into tears, and they collided in the middle of his living room and held on. And for 30 seconds Zara forgot about the men standing at the perimeter and the floor-to-ceiling windows and the man standing near the far wall watching them like he'd never seen something like this before. "Are you okay?" Minute G kept saying. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay." Zara pulled back, held her face in her hands, checked her over the same way Minute G was checking her. "I'm okay." "He hasn't." Minute G dropped her voice. "He hasn't done anything." "No." Zara shook her head. "No, nothing like that." Minute G looked past her at him. Her expression went sharp as a blade. "You're a monster," she said. "I don't know what you're doing to her or what you want with her, but you're a monster, and when I'm fine." Zara stepped slightly between them. Minute G. "Look at me." She waited until she did. "I'm fine. It's a work arrangement. Temporary. It's complicated." Minute G searched her face. "Zara. I will explain everything. I promise. But right now I need you to stop going to police stations." Zara squeezed her hands. "Please. For me. Just go home. I'll call you. I'll figure this out." Minute G looked at her for a long time. Then she looked at him. Then she looked back at Zara with the expression of someone filing something away for later. The specific, dangerous patience of a woman who knew that later always came. "Call me," she said. "Every day." "Every day," Zara agreed. They walked Minute G out. And then it was just the two of them in the enormous room, and Zara turned on him. "You made me lie," she said. "To my best friend. To the person who—" Her voice cracked and she shoved it back together. "I looked her in the face and lied to her." He was watching her. That still, concentrated attention that she was beginning to understand was his version of being fully present. "Would you have preferred I explained it to her?" he said. "That your voice creates physical sensation in my body for reasons neither of us understands. The explanation is that you kidnapped me." "Yes." That's what you say to someone when they ask why their best friend isn't coming home. Zara. Don't say my name. She turned and walked away from him because if she kept looking at him she was going to do something she'd regret, and he caught her arm. His hand closed around her wrist. And he stopped. Again, that sudden, total stop. His grip didn't tighten. His breath went shallow. She could see him processing something, reading information off the contact between his hand and her skin, and he said quietly, "Your heart is beating so fast." "Because I'm angry and terrified, you psychopath." She yanked her arm free. "Because you've taken everything from me, my life, my choices, my friend, and you stand there like it's a reasonable transaction." "I know," he said. "I know it isn't." "Then why?" "Because I'm selfish." He said it without flinching. "Because for the first time in 12 years I felt something and I couldn't." He stopped. Jaw tightening. "I couldn't walk away from it." The room was very quiet. Zara looked at him. He was looking somewhere past her, and for the first time since Thursday night, his face wasn't closed. It was just, open. Bare. Exhausted. The face of a man who had just said something true for possibly the first time in a long time and didn't know what to do with the aftermath. He looked almost human. She looked away first. Day 10. Dinner. He had a chef. Of course he had a chef. The chef prepared things that looked like art and presumably tasted extraordinary. And every night for 9 days Zara had asked for food to be brought to her room because she would rather eat alone than sit across from Kim Jae-won and pretend this was normal. He sent someone to get her on day 10. "Mr. Kim requests your presence at dinner," Tae-sung said, at her door. "Mr. Kim can eat alone like every other night. Mr. Kim says he will have food brought to you intravenously if you don't come downstairs." Zara stared at him. Did he actually say that? Tae-sung's expression was perfectly neutral. He said force-fed. "I'm paraphrasing for everyone's dignity." She came downstairs. They sat across from each other at a table designed for 12, two small islands of light in a large dark room. The food was extraordinary. Zara ate like she was being timed. He watched her. "You're losing weight," he said. "Stress will do that. Eat more." "Thank you for that medical advice." She reached for her water. "I'll add it to the list of things you've given me without my consent." He looked at her. Not annoyed. Not cold. Something almost appreciative in it, like she was consistently doing something he found interesting. "Tell me about Nigeria," he said. Zara looked up. "Why?" "Because I know nothing about you." "And whose fault is that? You didn't ask me here, you took me here." "Tell me about Nigeria," he said again, quieter. "Why?" She set her fork down. "Planning to kidnap my whole family next? Work your way through my hometown." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, the ghost of one. "You have a sharp tongue," he said, "for someone in your position." Zara looked at him across the candlelight and said, very pleasantly, "And you have no soul for someone in yours." She picked her fork back up. "Although, wait. You literally can't feel anything. So I guess that tracks." He laughed. Not a polite sound. Not a strategic one. An actual, real, caught-off-guard laugh. The kind that comes out before you've decided to let it, and it transformed his face so completely and so fast that Zara sat there with her fork halfway to her mouth and forgot what she was doing. She had never heard him laugh. She hadn't been sure he could. "Did you just?" She set the fork down. "Was that?" "I felt that," he said. He sounded almost wondering. "Not physically. Here." He touched his chest again, that same brief gesture from the first night. "You stung me. I felt it." Zara stared at him. "You felt me insult you?" "Yes." "Emotionally?" "Yes." "I hurt your feelings?" "A bit." "Yes." "Good," she said. "You deserve it." But she was still looking at him. Looking at his face, which was still slightly open, slightly warm, slightly rearranged from whatever the laugh had done to it, and something was happening in her chest that she didn't have language for yet. Something that had nothing to do with strategy or escape routes or the careful inventory she'd been keeping of all the reasons to hate him. "What happened?" she said slowly. "When you were 20. He looked at her. And for a long moment he said nothing, and she thought he wouldn't. She thought he'd close back down, and she'd get the locked door, the empty eyes, the man who decided nothing was worth feeling. Then he pulled his chair back slightly, folded his hands on the table, and told her. His father had enemies. That, he said, was the job description. You accumulate power, You accumulate people who want to take it from you. Standard operating procedure. He'd grown up understanding this the way other children grow up understanding traffic lights. The night it happened, he'd gone to his father's office to return borrowed car keys. Wrong place. Wrong time. Right in the path of a bullet that had been ordered, planned, and paid for 6 weeks in advance. He took it in the back. The bullet lodged near my spine, he said. His voice hadn't changed. Still flat, still clinical, a man describing someone else's history. The surgery was 8 hours. When I woke up, I couldn't feel my hands. He looked down at them. They told me the nerve damage was significant but hopefully temporary. That sensation usually returned within weeks. He paused. It didn't return. You can't feel anything, Zara said. Nothing at all. Nothing physical. Temperature, gone. Pain, gone. I don't know when I'm cold. I don't know when I've been cut. 2 years ago someone broke 3 of my fingers in a meeting and I didn't know until the meeting was over and I looked down. He said it without self-pity, without anything. Food has texture but no taste to speak of. I shower every day because I know I'm supposed to. I can't feel the water. I sleep under blankets because I've been told people do that. I can't feel them. Zara was quiet. And the emotional numbness came later, he continued. Slowly. Like water draining from a bath. A year after the injury I stopped dreaming. 3 years after, my father died and I stood at his funeral and felt, he stopped, nothing. Not grief. Not loss. Not even the discomfort of a room full of crying people. Just nothing. The candles had burned low between them. That's terrible, Zara said. He looked up. Don't. I'm not pitying you, she said. I'm saying it's terrible because it is. You lost your father and couldn't grieve him. You live in a body that doesn't talk to you. It's terrible, J1. Someone should have said that to you. He looked at her for a very long time. No one has said that to me, he said, and there was something in his voice now, underneath the flatness, something pressed against glass, trying to get through. You felt my insult tonight, Zara said. You laughed. You felt me in the mall and you felt my pulse when you grabbed my wrist and you... She stopped. You're not completely numb. Not anymore. No, he said. Not since you. The word hung between them. Which is why, he said quietly, I can't let you go. Zara looked at him across the candlelight, at this man who had taken everything from her and given her nothing in return except the unasked-for knowledge of what it looked like when someone who'd been empty for 12 years started, slowly and improbably, to fill back up. And she thought, she was in so much trouble. Not because he was dangerous. Because he was broken. Because someone had taken a 20-year-old boy and hollowed him out, and 12 years later she'd walked into a mall on a Thursday to buy shoes, and now she was the only thing in the world that could make him feel human. And despite everything, despite the men at the doors and the calls to her boss and the lies she told Minute G, some part of her, some deeply inconvenient, deeply foolish part, was not entirely sure she wanted to walk away from that. Please subscribe. Like this video and comment the sense that hooked you. Hit the notification bell. Week 2. The dress she'd worn 3 days in a row was clean. That was the point she was making. Laundered. Pressed. Dignified. J1 stared at it like it had personally offended him. That's the 4th time, he said from the doorway of the dining room, hands folded behind his back, impossibly crisp in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent. Zara looked up from her breakfast. 4th time what? That dress. She set down her fork. Are you counting my outfits? I notice patterns. You need a hobby. I have hobbies. He crossed to the table, pulled out the chair across from her with the kind of deliberate calm that made her want to throw the orange juice at him. We are going shopping. The words landed like a sentence. Zara blinked. Then laughed. One short, disbelieving sound. I'm sorry, what? Shopping. He poured himself coffee like this was a normal conversation. Today. 1 hour. I don't want your money. This isn't charity. He sipped. You're representing me now. You need better clothes. The dining room went very, very quiet. Zara slowly put down her fork, turned in her chair to face him fully, and said, with tremendous calm, representing you. Yes. I'm your hostage. My guest. His expression didn't move. There's a difference. J.A., she stopped. Breathed. Picked up her fork again. I will not go shopping with you. 1 hour. No. 45 minutes. No. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and said, the car leaves in 20, and walked out like the matter was settled, which, she would find out, it absolutely was. The luxury district of Seoul gleamed like it had been polished specifically for his arrival. It probably had. 2 black SUVs. For men she'd never seen before, materializing from seemingly nowhere to create a perimeter around them. Pedestrians noticing, then deliberately not noticing, the way people learn to do around men like him. Zara walked beside Jaewon in the dress she'd worn 4 times and stared at the storefronts with the expression of someone being marched toward a very expensive firing squad. "Pick anything," he said. "No." He stopped in front of a window. "Something floaty and white on a mannequin. That would look good on you." "I don't care." "The cut would." Kim Jae-won. She turned to face him on the sidewalk, dropping her voice so only he could hear. "I am not going to stand here and pretend this is a date. I am not your girlfriend, I am not your guest, I am a woman you have illegally detained and I will not let you." He was already walking into the store. "Buy me things." She finished to his retreating back, then spun to find 3 of his men staring at her with the careful blankness of people who very much did not want to get involved. She smiled tightly at them. Followed him inside. The next 40 minutes were a special kind of warfare. He would point at something. She would shake her head. He would gesture at the attendant anyway. She would step between them. He would sidestep her. She would grab his arm. He would look down at her hand on his arm with an expression that made her immediately remove it. "I don't want the jacket. It's cashmere." "I don't care. You're cold every morning in the penthouse. I feel it." She opened her mouth. Closed it. "What does that? How do you even stop buying the jacket?" The jacket was bought. By the time they hit the 3rd store, Zara had reached a level of frustration that existed beyond words. Bags were accumulating around them. Attendants were moving with the urgent energy of people on commission. Jaewon moved through it all with the serene focus of a man completing a mission he'd assigned himself. It was the earrings that broke her. Tiny gold things, simple, the kind she would have actually chosen for herself, and somehow, he knew. He was holding them out to the attendant without even looking at her. Like of course, like obviously, like he'd just known Anne. "Stop!" The entire store froze. Zara was breathing hard. Her voice had come out louder than intended, but she was committed now, standing in the middle of a designer boutique in a 4-day-old dress surrounded by bags she hadn't asked for, pointing at the most composed man she'd ever met. "I don't want this. I don't want any of this. I don't want your guilt money. I don't feel guilt." He said it simply. Confused, almost. Genuine in a way that knocked the wind out of her argument. "I want you to have nice things." She stared at him. He stared back. "Why?" she said, slowly. "Why do you care?" The store was silent. His men were suddenly very interested in the middle distance. The attendant had gone completely still. Jaewon was quiet for a moment in the particular way he had, not like he was searching for words but like he was deciding whether to share the ones he'd already found. "Because when you're happy," he said, "your voice changes. Softer." His eyes stayed on hers. "I can feel the difference." The world did something strange for about 3 seconds. Zara's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The anger was still there, it was absolutely still there, but something had tangled in the middle of it, something she didn't have a word for yet, something she actively refused to name. He tilted his head, the faintest hint of something that might, in a different face, have been called satisfaction. "So?" He turned back to the attendant. "Will you pick, or shall I?" A long, defeated pause. "That dress," she said. Very quietly. "The blue one. In the window." She would later tell herself she only said it to stop him from buying something worse. He bought 20 dresses. "I said one," she said, standing in the middle of what appeared to be an upscale explosion. "I like them all." Jaewon. "And the shoes?" "There are 6 pairs." 12. "Oh my God." She put her hands over her face. She could feel herself doing it, the thing she'd promised she wouldn't do. She was angry crying, which was the most undignified form of crying. Tears she absolutely did not want escaping around the edges of her hands while she stood in front of a man who made her furious and inexplicably, infuriatingly sane. "This is too much. This is insane, this is." "I own 3 hotels," he said. She lowered her hands. Her eyes were wet. She stared at him. "That does not make kidnapping better." "No," he agreed. "Money doesn't fix kidnapping." "No," he agreed again, and there was something in his voice, not guilt, he'd said he didn't feel guilt, but something adjacent to it, something heavy, that made her look at him for a second too long. She looked away first. She kept the blue dress. Week 3. He didn't tell her about the dinner until that morning. "A business dinner," he said over coffee. reading something on his phone with the infuriating focus of a man who expected logistics to arrange themselves around his schedule. Tonight. You'll come. Zara looked up from her book. Is this a test? He glanced at her. To see if I'll run, she said. A pause. Then, with something that might have been respect, yes. She considered this. She thought about the 8 men she'd counted in the building, the car that was always running, the way every exit had somehow always had someone near it. She thought about how she'd stopped trying to map escape routes 3 days ago, less because it was futile and more because she wasn't ready to think about the more because. Fine, she said. But I'm wearing the blue dress. Something shifted in his expression. There and gone. Fine, he said. She wore the blue dress and she looked, objectively, devastating. She knew it the moment she walked into the lobby and the 2 men stationed there both suddenly found the ceiling very interesting. She knew it when the car arrived and Jaewon opened the door and his eyes traveled from her heels to her face in one slow, controlled assessment and then he said absolutely nothing, which was louder than any compliment. The restaurant was the kind of place where the menus had no prices. Jaewon moved through it like he owned it, which he might have. Zara had stopped being surprised by his ownership of things. She sat beside him and let the evening wash over her, the hum of conversation, the quiet efficiency of the staff, the way every person in the room had noticed him enter and was pretending they hadn't. She was in the middle of deciding the salmon was genuinely exceptional when a man approached the table. He was her father's age. Well-dressed. The specific smug energy of someone who had been important for so long he'd forgotten others could see it. Kim Jae-won, the man said, in Korean, pulling out the chair across from them without being invited. I heard you were in town. Jae-won's posture didn't change. Choi. Choi settled into the chair with proprietary ease and let his eyes slide to Zara with the open, uncomplicated assessment of a man who had never once been checked for it. Then, in Korean, smooth, conversational, certain she wouldn't understand, he said, Jae-won brought his foreign whore? How desperate. The table went very still. Zara set down her fork with a small, deliberate clink. I understood that, she said. In perfect Korean. The blood left Choi's face so quickly it was almost funny. Almost. He recovered with the speed of a man who had practiced social recovery his entire life. Ah, a laugh, conciliatory, empty. It speaks Korean. Impressive for a... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't finish it because Jae-won stood up. Not dramatically. Not with noise. One moment he was seated and the next he was standing and he reached across the table and took Choi by the throat with one hand and walked him backward into the wall with the efficiency of someone who had done this before and had never once needed a second attempt. Zara didn't move. The restaurant went silent. Not the polite, ambient quiet of before, absolute. Total. The kind of silence that happened when everyone in a room simultaneously decided they weren't there. Choi was making a sound. His hands were on Jae-won's wrist and they weren't doing anything, which told Zara everything about how strong Jae-won's grip was and how much Choi had understood his mistake. Finish that sentence, Jae-won said. His voice was perfectly level. I dare you. Boss Kim, a rasp, I meant no. The next part Zara watched with the detached clarity of someone in mild shock. It was not long. It was not theatrical. It was simply very efficient and very thorough, and by the end of it Choi was on the floor and Jae-won had straightened his jacket and turned to face the room. She is under my protection, he said, to no one and everyone. The room could have heard a pin drop. Spread the word. He turned, took Zara's hand, and walked them out. In the car she was shaking. She hadn't realized until she was inside, until the door closed and the city started moving past the windows, that her hands were trembling in her lap. She pressed them flat against her thighs and stared forward and breathed. You didn't have to, she started. Yes. I did. He was looking out his own window. His hands were relaxed. She had no idea how his hands were relaxed. No one insults you. Jae-won. She turned to look at him. Why do you care? I'm just your, she almost said prisoner and caught herself, your sensation experiment. The city moved past the glass. He turned to look at her, and she didn't know what she expected. Deflection, blankness, one of his perfectly crafted non-answers, but what she got was silence. The specific kind of silence that meant something was actually happening behind it. When he spoke, his voice was different. Quieter. Careful, in the way of someone handling something that surprised them. No, he said. You're not. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. The car drove on. Meeting the family. Your mother, Zara said. Yes. You want me to meet your mother? She requested it. Requested. She turned from the window to stare at him. I'm not, Jae-won, I cannot meet your mother. I'm being held against my will in your penthouse. I can't walk into someone's family home and... She'll love you, he said, pulling on his jacket. Probably more than she loves me. That's... She stopped. Wait, is that supposed to be reassuring? He considered it. It's true. You are the strangest man I have ever met. You've mentioned that. It bears repeating. Madam Kim was 63 years old and had clearly decided somewhere around 40 that elegance was a language and she was going to speak it fluently until she died. She met them in the entrance of a house that was too tasteful to be called a mansion and too large to be called anything else, dressed in cream silk with the carriage of a woman who had never once doubted that a room should arrange itself around her. She took one look at Zara. Then she grinned. It was the most unexpected thing that had ever happened, including the kidnapping. Finally, Madam Kim said, in crisp, warm English. A woman with spine. She took Zara's hands without invitation, squeezing them. All those Korean girls were terrified of him. Stood around looking decorative. Useless. I can see. Zara, completely off balance. I'm not here voluntarily, Madam Kim turned to her son. The temperature in the room dropped 4 degrees. You kidnapped her, she said. J1, who faced down criminal rivals without blinking. It's complicated. What is wrong with you? Still in Korean, sharp as a blade, while Zara watched with open fascination. Your father would be appalled. Mother. Appalled, J1, I did not raise. It wasn't a... Sit down, Madam Kim said, and turned back to Zara with the warmth of someone who had simply filed the last 30 seconds in a cabinet labeled deal with later. Ignore my stupid son. Come. Sit. Eat. Tell me everything. Zara Saturday. J1 sat across from them, and for the first time in as long as Zara had known him, all of 3 weeks, which somehow felt like both longer and shorter, he looked faintly uncomfortable. She found she enjoyed that a great deal. Within 20 minutes Madam Kim was laughing so hard she had to set down her tea. Zara had told her about the shopping trip. About the jacket. About the earrings and the 12 pairs of shoes and the way he'd stood in the middle of a designer store with the serene certainty of a man purchasing supplies for a very reasonable expedition. He bought you earrings, Madam Kim said, eyes dancing. He bought me a wardrobe, Zara said. I said one dress. He doesn't understand moderation. Madam Kim glanced at her son, who was eating with great focused attention to his plate. Never has. When he was 7 he wanted a fish. We got him a fish. He researched for 3 weeks and came home with an aquarium. Mother. 47 fish, J1. 47. Zara pressed her lips together. She would not laugh. She would absolutely not. She laughed. And J1, looking up from his plate, caught the sound of it, and something in his face did a thing she'd seen it do only rarely. Not quite a smile, but the shadow of one, the architecture of one, like his face remembered what smiling was and was considering the attempt. Madam Kim watched all of this over the rim of her teacup and said nothing. Then, to her son, so casually it could have been about the weather, marry her. J1 looked up. Mother. I'm not joking. She set down her cup. Best thing that ever happened to you. We haven't. Look at her. Madam Kim gestured toward Zara with the confidence of someone presenting evidence. She argues with you. She laughs at you. She's sitting at my table discussing your childhood fish while being held captive and still managing to be the most present person in the room. She folded her hands. Marry her. Zara opened her mouth. Madam Kim held up one finger without looking at her. Not you yet, dear. I'll come to you. Kim Minute-ho arrived 40 minutes late and came through the door the way a weather system comes through a window. Fast, warm, and immediately affecting the atmosphere of every room. He was shorter than his brother, lighter in every sense, wearing the particular energy of someone who had been born charming and had decided to commit to the bit. He stopped in the doorway, took in the scene, his mother, J1's careful blankness, and Zara, and his entire face lit up. Hyung, he said, pointing at his brother with the enthusiasm of a man confirming a rumor. You have good taste. J1, don't. Minute-ho was already crossing the room toward Zara, hand extended, grin the size of a small continent. Kim Minute-ho. The better-looking brother. I see you've been surviving my Hyung's attempts at human interaction. Minute-ho. Which, congratulations, not everyone manages it. Are you Nigerian? I can tell from your Korean, which is excellent by the way. I had a professor once. He was sitting down now, nobody had invited him. He'd simply settled in with the ease of a man who treated every room like he'd been there before. Do you have a black friend? Single? I'm asking for me. Hard to find sisters in Korea, I'm not going to pretend. Zara had not meant to laugh. She'd been braced for more of the impossible, exhausting tension that J1 generated by simply existing, and instead there was this sunbeam of a person sitting across from her talking about wanting to meet black women, and she just, "You're ridiculous," she said. "I'm charming," Minato said, pointing at her. "There's a difference." Something moved in her periphery. J1 had gone very still. "Stop flirting with her," he said. It was quiet. Even. Exactly how he said everything. But Minato turned to look at him with the slow, delighted focus of a younger sibling who had just found something extremely useful. "Oh," Minato said. "It's like that." "It's not." "Say no more, Hyun." Minato leaned back in his chair, smiling at the ceiling. "Say absolutely no more." Minato found him in the garden an hour later. "You're in love with her," Minato said, without preamble, standing beside his brother at the edge of the stone path. "I can't feel." "You got jealous." Minato shoved his hands in his pockets, looked sideways at him. Visibly. At the table. In front of Mom. "That's not." "You love her, Hyun." Minato's voice dropped, the teasing gone, something genuinely gentle in its place. "First time in 12 years you've looked at someone like she matters. That's not an experiment. That's not proximity or novelty." He paused. "That's love. You love her." The garden was very quiet. In the house, through the windows, they could see the faint glow of the dining room. Their mother's voice, rising and falling. Zara's laugh, that laugh, brief and bright, traveling all the way out here. J1 felt it in his chest. Like always. Warmer than usual. "She's still my prisoner," he said. Minato was quiet for a long moment. "Yeah," he said. "You should fix that." Week 4. The gala was white and gold and full of people who'd been polishing their importance since birth. Zara wore the blue dress. J1 hadn't told her to. She'd appeared in the lobby and he'd looked at her and felt that thing in his sternum that happened specifically when she existed near him. A frequency, warm and particular, and said nothing, which he'd learned to interpret as the highest compliment he was physically capable of giving. They moved through the room well. She'd stopped being surprised by how well they moved through rooms. He was control and gravity, she was heat and attention. Together they were a thing people watched without being able to explain why. She was mid-conversation with a remarkably dull man about Korean-Nigerian trade relations, when she felt J1 go slightly still beside her. She followed his eyes. A woman in architectural red was approaching them. Mid-50s. The smile of someone who treated social occasions like sport. "J1, the woman said. Warmth calibrated to exactly the temperature of pretending. "What a surprise." Her eyes moved to Zara with the specific assessment of someone taking inventory. "And your friend." The word landed with all its intended weight. Zara felt it. The friend. The pause before it. The implication embedded in the architecture of that pause. Foreign, unfamiliar, lesser, explain yourself. She was opening her mouth. "My wife," J1 said. The room didn't go silent. It was too large for that. But the small constellation of people around them went very still, and the silence rippled outward in a way that was almost physical. Zara made a sound. Privately. In the back of her throat. The sound of a woman who had just had her central nervous system rerouted. "I didn't realize you were married." Mrs. Park was recalibrating, the whole social performance reshuffling in real time. Recent. J1's arm had settled around Zara's waist. His hand at her hip, warm and certain. "We are very happy." He pulled her slightly closer and she let him because what else was she supposed to do? She was operating on about 30% of normal brain function, and she was a professional, and she smiled at Mrs. Park with every what she had. "Very," she said. Later, in the car, she sat with her arms folded and stared straight ahead for approximately 45 seconds before she trusted herself to speak. "Wife?" "Yes." "You said wife." "I was there." "J1." She turned. He was watching the city. "You can't just say wife." "She was going to insult you." Still looking out the window. "I stopped it." "By lying." "Was it a lie?" The car was quiet. Outside, Sol moved past and lights. "Was marrying me," he said, carefully, still not looking at her. So terrible to imagine. Something happened in her chest. She told it to stop. "You kidnapped me," she said. "Yes." You took me from my home, you." "Yes." He turned, finally, to look at her. "And if I let you go?" His eyes stayed on hers. "What then?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because she had thought about going home. She had thought about it every day for the first week. "I don't know," she said. She'd meant to say something else. Something with more armor in it. She didn't. I don't know, she said again, quieter, and looked out her own window. J1 said nothing. But his hand, resting on the center console between them, turned palm up. She didn't take it. But she looked at it for a long time. Falling. Mornings became a thing she looked forward to without meaning to. He was always there before her, coffee already made, something read and set aside, the particular quiet of a man who had learned to exist without filling silence. She would come in and pour herself a cup and they would talk about nothing, everything, the world, whatever occurred to them, and somehow an hour would pass and she'd look up and feel something strange and light in her chest and think, what is happening to me? One afternoon he stood in her kitchen, his kitchen, but she'd claim half of it, holding a wooden spoon like it had personally wronged him. This is wrong, he said, staring into the pot. You didn't add the crayfish. The recipe. Forget the recipe. This is a goosey soup, not a laboratory. You have to feel it. He looked at her. I literally feel everything. That's my problem. Then feel the soup. He looked back at the pot with an expression so deeply skeptical that she started laughing before she could stop herself. Real laughter, the kind that came from somewhere low and honest, and he turned to look at her with that expression she'd started cataloguing, the one where his face seemed genuinely uncertain whether it was allowed to join. You're terrible at cooking, she said. I know. You're going to burn it. I know. Give me the spoon. No. He adjusted his grip on the spoon with the committed energy of a man who had decided this was now a matter of principle. I'm learning. He burned it. She made him stand in the corner while she remade it from scratch, which he accepted with the gravity of a man receiving a fair sentence. She taught him to dance one evening because she'd put on music and couldn't help herself, and she turned around and he was standing there watching her with an expression she didn't have a word for, so she'd said, come here, and he had. He was not a natural. He was not unnatural either. He felt rhythm the way he felt everything, intensely, somewhere in his body rather than his head, but translating it to movement was different, and she stood in front of him with her hands on his arms and talked him through it, and at some point she noticed that they were close together in the low light and the music was still going and his eyes were on her face and she had stopped talking. You're not telling me what to do, he said. I noticed. Neither of them moved. Then she stepped back, and the moment broke, and she turned to adjust the volume on her phone, and he was quiet behind her. Can I ask you something? She said, not turning around. Yes. She turned around, walked toward him, reached up, slowly, and put her hand against his face, his cheek, her palm, watching his eyes. Can you feel this? She asked. She didn't mean it the way she'd asked before. She meant it differently now and they both knew it. Yes, he said. His voice was different. She felt his jaw move slightly under her hand. Everything. The quietest thing he'd ever said. When it's you. She looked at him for a long moment. The room was warm. The music was low. His eyes had not left hers since she'd touched him. She dropped her hand. I can't. She stepped back. The armor going up, not easily, not smoothly, but going up. This isn't real. Whatever this is, I'm still your prisoner, and I can't. Then I'll set you free. She looked at him. He looked back. I mean it, he said. And the terrible thing, the thing that sat in her chest like a stone and like a wing at the same time, was that she believed him. She believed him completely. And she had no idea what she was going to do about that. Please subscribe. Like this video and comment the sense that hooked you. Hit the notification bell. Day 30. She almost didn't go. He'd sent someone to tell her he wanted to see her in his office. Not the penthouse, not the dining room, the office, and something about the formality of it had sat wrong in her stomach all morning. Like a word you know but can't quite place. Like a sound before an earthquake. She knocked anyway. Come in. He was behind his desk. Jacket on. Hands folded. The whole performance of composure he'd had since day one, except she knew him now. She knew the difference between his control and his stillness, and this was control, which meant something underneath it was moving. Sit down, he said. I'll stand. Reflex. Old habit. She wasn't sure who she was protecting with it anymore. He looked at her for a moment. Then he opened a folder on his desk and turned it toward her. Documents. An apartment address. A company letterhead. Numbers. You're free to go, he said. The room tilted slightly. I've arranged an apartment. A good one, safe area, 6 months paid. There's a position at Park International. They need a Yoruba language consultant. It's legitimate work. And money. He slid an envelope toward her. Enough to get home if you want to, or stay if you want that. Either way, you're safe. Zara stood very still. She had wanted this. She had wanted exactly this. She had catalogued the wanting. Her flat, her freedom, her life, every day for the first week. She had built the wanting like a wall. Just like that, she said. It came out strange. Not the way she'd intended. Yes. 30 days of, she stopped. And now just, here's an apartment. Off you go. He stood. Came around the desk. Not close. He stopped a careful distance from her, and she noticed the careful. She noticed everything he did now without meaning to, and he looked at her with a particular expression she'd never fully decoded. The one that lived somewhere between composed and cracked. I can't keep you against your will, he said. A pause. That's not. Something moved through his face. That's not love. The word dropped into the room like something thrown from a height. Zara's breath stopped. She stared at him. He held her gaze. Didn't flinch from it, didn't qualify it, didn't take it back. Just stood there with the word hanging in the air between them and let it be exactly what it was. You love me, she said. It wasn't a question. It came out of her mouth before she decided to say it, quiet and cracked around the edges, and she felt, to her profound annoyance, her eyes filling. I do, he said. Simply. Completely. Which is why you have to choose freely. He looked at her steadily. Stay or go. She was crying now. Which was humiliating. She was standing in front of the man who'd kidnapped her 30 days ago, crying in his office, because he was letting her go. She had genuinely never been more furious with herself. She picked up the envelope. She picked up the folder. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame and stood there for 3 seconds with her back to him, breathing, with the absolute mountain of things she wasn't going to say pressing against the back of her teeth. She walked out. In her room, she packed the blue dress last. Life without him. The apartment was nice. Of course it was nice. He owned 3 hotels. Nice was the floor. It was a clean, warm, 10th floor flat in Mapo-gu with good windows and a kitchen she had no interest in using and a bed she lay in on the first night staring at the ceiling, waiting to feel the freedom settle over her like something deserved. She was still waiting at 3 a.m. Minute G had been Zara's closest friend in Seoul since her first semester of Korean studies, a woman of spectacular opinions and very little patience for nonsense, who showed up at Zara's new apartment on day 3 with fried chicken and the expression of someone who had been owed an explanation for quite some time. You're free, Minute G said, at some point during the debrief, gesturing at the apartment with a chicken bone. You're free and you have a job and he gave you money and you look like someone ran over your dog. She tilted her head. You don't have a dog. I know. You look like someone ran over the idea of your dog. Minute G. Why do you look so sad? Zara was quiet for a moment. She pulled her knees to her chest on the couch and looked at the very nice window with its very nice view of a city she had come to know while she was not supposed to be knowing it. I don't know, she said. You should hate him. I know. He kidnapped you. I know. Minute G put down the chicken. Her voice went careful. But you don't. Zara pressed her forehead against her knees. I think I love him, she said, into the fabric of her jeans, muffled and wretched. How stupid is that? How genuinely, catastrophically, embarrassingly stupid is that? Silence. Very stupid, Minute G said, gently. Absolutely unhinged. Completely ridiculous. Thank you. I support you fully. Zara laughed once, short and broken, into her knees. Across the city, in a penthouse that was very quiet now, Kim Jae-won sat in the dark. Not theatrically. Not dramatically. Just, in the dark, because he'd never minded it and now he was minding it and that was information he didn't know what to do with. Minute-ho found him there on day 5. Came through the door, stopped, looked around, and said, Hyun. Jae-won looked up. You look terrible. Thank you. I'm not joking, you look. Minute-ho came closer, examining him with the concerned energy of someone encountering a plant that was going wrong. When did you last sleep? I sleep. When did you last? He stopped. Something shifted in his face. The numbness is back. Jae-won looked at him steadily. Said nothing. Oh no, Minute-ho said, and sat down. It's fine. It is not. It was always going to come back. She was He stopped. The word experiment was ash in his mouth. He'd stopped using it before the second week. It's fine. Then why are you sitting in the dark? I like the dark. You called it oppressive last month. Silence. She made it better, Jae-won said. He said it like a man making a report, like it was simply data, except his voice was doing something Minute-ho had never heard from him. A flatness that was too flat, that was something trying very hard to sound like nothing. Without her, I can't feel anything. Not the way. A pause. Not at all. Then go get her, Hyun. She chose to leave. He said it very quietly. I have to respect that. Minato opened his mouth. Closed it. Because J1 was right and they both knew it. Because a man who had done the one right thing, the only fully, unambiguously right thing in the whole mess, could not undo it without destroying what made it right. Minato sat with his brother in the dark for a long time. Zara was at work when Madam Kim called. She nearly didn't answer. She stared at the name on her screen, Kim Jae-won's mother. She'd saved it at the family dinner, a fact she was choosing not to analyze, and then answered because she was constitutionally incapable of being rude to elders. He's dying without you, Madam Kim said. No greeting. No preamble. 63 years old and completely done with the scenic route. Zara closed her office door. Madam Kim. Don't Madam Kim me. Sit down. I'm all ready. My son is sitting in the dark. He isn't eating properly. Minato says his, gone quiet. In the specific way. Her voice, usually warm steel, was something softer now. You understand what that means, for him. Zara pressed her hand flat on her desk. He let me go, she said. He chose to let me go, he said. He loves you too much to trap you. Measured. Clear. Like a woman laying out facts. And he is too stubborn and too honorable, God help him, to come to you now. Because it was his choice and he'll stand in it until it kills him. A pause. But he needs you. And unless I've completely lost my judgment, which I have not, a shorter pause, you need him. Zara stared at the wall. The apartment. The job. The money. The blue dress folded on the shelf above her bed because she hadn't been able to put it anywhere else. The key. He'd given her a key. On day 23, for some errand that required her to return before him, and when she tried to return it at the door he'd said, keep it, and she had, and she still had it, and she had not once asked herself why she'd kept it because she didn't want to know the answer. She knew the answer. Zara, Madam Kim said. I'll go, Zara said. Good, said Madam Kim. Then, wear the blue dress. How do you even know about the... I know everything. Go. The realization. The lift up to the penthouse felt longer than it ever had. She stood in it with the key in her hand and the blue dress on. She'd gone home and changed because she was only human and Madam Kim had told her to. And the numbers climbed and she thought about the 30 ways this could go wrong and the one way it could go right and the fact that she had arrived at this moment by a route she would not have designed for herself and yet here she was. The doors opened. She stepped into the penthouse. It was dark. Not entirely. The city light came through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul spread out below like a circuit board. But the lamps were off, and it took her eyes a moment. He was in the chair by the window. Just sitting. Very still. The way he'd been on day one and every day after and the way she'd learned to read. The specific stillness that meant he was somewhere internal, somewhere the numbness lived, somewhere that had gotten bigger in the 12 years before she'd arrived. J1, she said. He turned. And she watched it happen. She'd been looking for it, the thing Minato had described, the thing she'd seen in increments over 30 days, but she hadn't been prepared for the full version. Hadn't been prepared to watch it move through him like a light coming on in a room that had been locked. His posture, his face, his eyes, alive, immediately, completely, just because she was in the room. He stood. You came back, he said. The two most careful words she'd ever heard. She crossed the room. She didn't fully decide to. Her feet just went, closing the distance, until she was standing in front of him with the city behind him and her heart doing something she was not going to describe because she had too much dignity. I love you, she said. His breath shifted. I fought it, she said, immediately, needing him to understand the full account. I catalogued all the reasons, I made lists, I told Minute G, I argued with myself at 3 in the morning for 2 weeks. Zara. I hated it. I hated that I loved you. I still find it objectively bananas. Zara. But I do. I love you. She stopped. Breathed. You're free to go isn't supposed to make someone miserable. That's not how freedom is supposed to feel. He looked at her like she was something he hadn't been sure was real. You're free, he said. Right now. You don't have to. I choose you. She said it clearly. Fully. No armor, no qualification, no distance between the words and what she meant. Not because you kidnapped me. Not because of money or the apartment or fear, none of that. Because you're broken and I'm broken and somehow, she made a small helpless gesture, We are less broken together. And I am angry about it. But I'm choosing it anyway. Something happened in his face. She'd seen his face do many things over 30 days. She'd catalogued them all without meaning to. But this she hadn't seen. He crossed to her. She'd seen him move 1,000 ways, controlled, purposeful, threatening, careful, but not like this. Like the control had been set down somewhere. Like he was just going toward her without editing it. I can feel you, he said, close now. Right now. I can feel everything. His hand came up to her face. Not like the first time, when he'd asked her to speak and she'd said no and he'd felt the word. Like something else entirely. Something that didn't have a category except this. Finally, this. Everything, she said. Everything, he said, and kissed her. And she discovered, in the following moments, that Kim Jae-won kissed the same way he did everything. With absolute focus, with precision, with the specific intensity of a man experiencing something completely. Except there was nothing controlled about it, nothing calibrated. Just the 12 years of numbness breaking open all at once and him in the middle of it, feeling everything, and she thought, distantly, oh no. I am in so much trouble. She kissed him back. For the first time in 12 years, Kim Jae-won was completely, overwhelmingly, terrifyingly alive. He didn't mind at all. 2 months later. The same gala. White and gold. Same venue. The same room full of people who had been polishing their importance since before she'd arrived in Seoul, who had watched, 2 months ago, as Kim Jae-won put his arm around a woman in a blue dress and said my wife into a silence that had echoed for weeks. Those people were here again tonight. Zara was not in the blue dress. She was in green this time, deep, unapologetic green, because Minute G had selected it and Minute G had strong opinions and also because Jae-won had seen her in it at the door and gone very still in the particular way she'd learned to translate as the highest possible compliment. They moved through the room well. They always did. She was deep in conversation with a genuinely interesting woman about textile trade when she saw Jae-won, across the room, go very slightly still. She followed his eyes. Mrs. Park. Red architectural dress. The same practiced smile, recalibrated tonight with the energy of someone who'd done a little research. She moved toward them like a woman confident in her material. Jae-won, she said, warmly, arriving beside them. Lovely to see you again. Her eyes moved to Zara, then back, with that specific pause, the pause, and then, I heard your wife had moved out. Such a shame. Zara watched Jae-won's face. He smiled. She had never seen him smile, not fully, not the complete version, and the sight of it was honestly a little destabilizing. He smiled at Mrs. Park with the serenity of a man holding 4 aces and said, actually. He turned to Zara. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. Then he went down on one knee. The room, because of course the room was watching, it was always watching him, it had no choice, went silent. The box was small. Dark velvet. He opened it and she saw, briefly, before her vision went a little blurry, something that caught the light like a held breath. I lied last time, he said. His voice was steady. His eyes were on hers. Just hers, only hers. The room completely irrelevant to him in the specific way she'd learned meant she was the only thing in his frequency. I told a room full of people you were my wife to stop one woman from being small, he said. That was expedience. A pause, warm and waited. This is different. Another pause. Marry me. Choose me. Every day for the rest of our lives. Freely, completely, because you want to. Zara's hand was over her mouth. She was crying. Again. At a gala. In front of 200 people. She was going to be so embarrassed about this later, and she could not currently bring herself to care about that even slightly. You're still ridiculous, she said, from behind her hand. Is that a yes? It's a laugh, wet and real. You kidnapped me and now you're proposing at a gala. It's a yes or no question. Yes, she said. Yes, absolutely yes, yes 1,000. He was standing. The ring was on her finger. She barely felt it happen. Her hands were shaking. And then he was kissing her, and the room erupted, 200 people applauding in the warm gold light. Somewhere behind them, a body hit the floor with a dignified thump. Mrs. Park had fainted. She okay? Zara managed, when they broke apart. She'll be fine, he said, looking only at her. From across the room, cutting through the applause with the precision of a man who had been waiting for his moment. "Hey!" They both turned. Kim Minato, standing on a chair he absolutely should not have been standing on, champagne glass raised, grinning with the energy of a man whose patience had been rewarded by the universe. "About that black friend." "Minato. I'm just asking. It's been 2 months, I feel like we are family now. I feel like this is a reasonable." "Get off the chair." "Is she single though? I just want to know if she's—" Zara was laughing so hard she was pressed against Jaewon's shoulder, and he had his arm around her, and she felt, against her cheek, through his jacket, the quiet, steady thing that lived in his chest, the warmth she'd felt the first time she'd pressed her hand to it and thought, something is happening here. Something had happened here. Epilogue. 1 year later. The flowers were too much. Zara had said simple. She'd said it 4 times. She'd sent a detailed brief. Somehow, between the venue in Seoul and the catering and the 500 guests including what appeared to be at least 30 people her mother had personally invited from Lagos, Simple had become a Korean-Nigerian wedding spectacular with 2 floral installations, 3 fabric patterns, a live talking drum, and a photo booth that Madam Kim had commissioned and refused to discuss. Zara stood in the preparation room in her dress, white silk and silver aso-oke, 2 ceremonies in one, Minute G's exacting work, and looked at herself in the mirror and felt something enormous and quiet sitting in her chest. "I still cannot believe," Minute G said, from behind her, adjusting a pin with the focus of a woman taking her maid of honor duties as a vocation, "that you are marrying your kidnapper." "Technically," Zara said, "he's about to be my husband. He was a criminal. He's working on that. You said that last month. Progress takes time." Minute G met her eyes in the mirror and despite everything, despite the completely unhinged route they had taken to get here, they were both smiling. "You're happy," Minute G said. "Quieter now." "Real." "Yes," Zara said. It was the simplest true thing she knew. At the altar, Minato was doing what Minato always did, generating ambient chaos in formal wear. He had already taken 2 photos on his phone, for the archive. Hyung attempted to fix Jaewon's already perfect collar twice, and was now standing at precisely the right angle to watch the door while maintaining the posture of a man being completely casual about it. Jaewon stood still. He'd been standing still for 6 minutes. It was a different kind of still from the old kind. Not the numbness, not the absence, not the 12 years of quiet dark. This was the stillness of a man paying attention. Of a man who had learned the difference between feeling nothing and feeling everything and was choosing to stand inside the everything. "Nervous?" Minato said. "Terrified." He said it plainly. "I can feel terror now." A pause. "It's awful." "Yeah. I love it." Minato looked at him for a moment, his brother, who had sat in the dark for 12 years, who had looked at a woman in a parking garage and felt something move for the first time and made every bad decision and one perfect one, and put a hand on his shoulder. "Yeah," Minato said. "I know." The doors opened. Jaewon felt her before he saw her. That was how it worked now. She was in his frequency. Then he saw her. The dress. The light. Her mother on one arm and her father on the other, both of them enormous and warm and beaming with the specific energy of people who had reviewed the full situation and decided to love him anyway and who he was going to spend his life making sure they were right to. Zara walked toward him. And Kim Jae-won, who had not cried in 12 years, who had been told by 2 separate therapists in that decade that his emotional connections were clinically abnormal, who had described love as a frequency and meant it as a diagnosis and discovered it was the only thing that ever truly mattered, felt his eyes fill. He didn't try to stop it. Minato made a sound beside him. "Don't," Jaewon said. "I'm not saying anything. You're thinking it." "I'm crying, Hyung, I'm not teasing you, I love her." "Then compose yourself." "You compose yourself." She arrived. Her father's placed her hand in his. He felt it everywhere. The vows were not the ones they'd written. The ones they'd written were in his pocket, neat and prepared, because he was Kim Jae-won and he prepared for everything. He looked at her in the light and said what was actually true instead. "You gave me back my humanity," he said. "I'll spend my life earning yours." She looked at him. Her eyes were bright. She said, with the expression of a woman who had decided to love him in full knowledge of all his facts, "You're still a criminal." A murmur of laughter moved through the room. "Working on that," he said. "I love you anyway." "I know," he said. I can feel it. And he kissed her, and felt joy, clean and complete and enormous, joy for the first time in 12 years, joy like a sound he'd forgotten his body knew how to make. And around them the room erupted, the talking drum began, Madam Kim was crying into an extremely tasteful handkerchief, Minute G was cheering, their combined families were celebrating in 2 languages simultaneously. So about the black friend. M-I-N-G-O. It's a wedding, it's a celebration, love is in the air. I will remove you from this. Her name is Adiz, I saw her on your Instagram, Zara, just a conversation, just a... Zara broke the kiss laughing. J1 looked at her, laughing, radiant, his, freely and completely and every day, and thought, 30 days. It only took 30 days. Then he thought, it was always going to be her. He felt the truth of it everywhere. The end.